and there's an amazing book called The Big Letdown, and she talks about basically how some lactation consultants will discourage breastfeeding, or at one moment of a challenge, if they feel like you're too overwhelmed, they might suggest it. Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Mama Magnolia. We are so excited to have one of my best friends, my sister, Maya, here along with us to talk about breastfeeding. Yes, breastfeeding. And we're just so excited. After talking with her, I felt like she has an amazing story of her journey. And of course, the heart of Mama Magnolia is to encourage the mother, the wife, the woman, in all walks of life. You never know. Sometimes we feel like we're alone in our journey, and it's not that. It's that, it's people go through very similar life experiences, and we learn lessons and things like that. So we hope to encourage you today. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to start with a statistic. Using data from the National Immunization Survey Child, researchers looked at how many mothers who gave birth in 2015 who introduced their babies to breastfeeding. Overall, 83% of U.S. mothers breastfed their babies at birth. But when researchers broke down that number by race, 85% of white mothers said that they breastfed their child, far more than the 69% of Black mothers who said the same, a 16% disparity. And, we understand in America, breastfeeding is still kind of a taboo subject, but especially amongst Black women. And a lot of that is due to slavery, wet nurses. A lot of trauma has persisted within our culture. So a lot of us don't breastfeed simply because, we don't have the information, and because of the trauma, again, that's passed down. We don't have the village like we used to. We don't have the support system. So it can be really, really challenging. Like when you're trying to explore the idea of breastfeeding, a lot of us are navigating this idea alone. So, Maya, I would love to just talk about your journey with breastfeeding and how successful were you able to breastfeed your child? I know that, your baby was born at 30 weeks. So can you tell us a little bit more about your journey of breastfeeding and how it's going today?
Okay, breastfeeding for me was a bit of a challenge because my baby was born prematurely. And so when he first came, I started with just pumps, like suction on there, and it was a really big challenge because it was 30 minutes and I got like the tiniest little drizzle of milk, or what they would call colostrum.
Right.
But my doctors told me, whatever you can get out, 3 drops, a little drizzle, bring it to the NICU. So I did that.
Yeah.
I pumped at the amount of time they told me he would feed, and then they took that little bit and they poured it down his little feeding tube, and I just started off like that, and then eventually my milk dropped and I began just pumping. My child didn't have a sucking reflex. So bottles, it was just me pumping bottles, bringing it to the NICU for 6 weeks straight. The most challenging thing I would say was that I didn't get to practice with him on the breast because he was only 3 pounds, 7 ounces when he was born. It was a challenge to get him to the correct weight so I could take him home. So if I wanted to practice with him, he would suck maybe couple minutes and then fall asleep. And then he would start to lose weight because it took a lot of energy to do that. So It's the battle of making enough milk, going and looking at him, just sitting there with him and just pumping while I'm sitting in front of his incubator, just letting just the image of him help my body to produce milk, and just thinking I have to do this.
Right.
It matters, especially for him.
Right.
With even surviving, what my body makes is going to be far more nutritious and aligned perfectly for him than any formula could be. And So that was kind of how my journey began. But then along the way, I started to produce too much milk because I didn't have my baby to set the milk. So I have like a freezer full of milk, and then you deal with engorged breasts and breasts feeling like rocks and all sorts of things. But I would just encourage mothers to press forward. Do what you got to do. I was on YouTube looking up videos like, oh, I got to bend down and massaging my arm up, anything to just keep moving forward. If you're able, even if you don't think you're able, try and try and try,
Yeah.
even if it's a little bit, because it matters. That little bit matters.
And I think a lot of people, like we feel like we always have to fill up a bottle, and their baby is just like literally their stomach is like that big. So, and at 30 weeks, his tummy was even smaller. So, I think a lot of times we get discouraged when we're not producing enough milk, but when they're first born, they literally he only needed that tiny drop. That colostrum is so nutrition dense that like he would have been fine. And a lot of us don't know that unless you like have that kind of like research or education, which you had. Did you have lactation support or?
I did. I found a local, it was called Lighthouse Pregnancy Resource Center. It was a resource center in my area, completely free. And my husband and I went there. We took classes, and we took classes on breastfeeding. Was the first thing we took classes on, and actually the only thing, because my son was born so early. We didn't get to take any more classes other than that. But it was vital. It was so vital in terms of just knowing what you're going to be your child is going to miss out on those antibodies. They're going to miss out on that extra boost to push them forward in terms of their their cholesterol. It's different things that when you breastfeed your baby, they just have a better chance at being healthier.
Right.
In general, even weight control is attributed to breastfeeding your child. And so that's kind of like how it went for me. I can tell you that when I was in the NICU, there was almost everybody gave birth to premature babies there, and I saw another mother, and I felt for her because they were urging her, please, if you can just produce a little milk. And she was discouraged, and she said, I can't. I tried, and it's like nothing's coming out, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And you have formula. She was very aggressive in a sense, but I could tell she was more so discouraged.
Yeah.
And she didn't know that she didn't need to. If she knew that all she needed was a drop, maybe she would have been a little bit more encouraged to go forward, but she didn't know that.
That education is so important, and having that lactation support is important, and also having the right lactation support, because not all lactation consultants are equal. And there's an amazing book called The Big Letdown, and she talks about basically how some lactation consultants will discourage breastfeeding, or at one moment of a challenge, if they feel like you're too overwhelmed, they might suggest it, which is fine. But I feel like, again, having that education, just knowing the fact that you only need a drop, I feel like if mothers had more options in like well-rounded education on, there are different ways that you can get the milk to come, because you could have continued exclusively pumping if your baby didn't latch on, or there's milk banks, and I know that's kind of like a little controversial now as well. But if you want to make it happen, you can. But like you said, even that thought, you were encouraged by even just looking at your child. Your nurses encouraged you as well by telling you only need just a little bit. That small thing can make all the difference. So imagine if you didn't have that support, you may not have been successful, and your child couldn't latch on for how long was it until he was able to latch on?
I don't think Justice latched on till just before he left. So I think it was about 6 or 7 weeks. He was just now latching on when I took him home from the hospital. But again, they told me don't breastfeed him all the time directly from the breast. Sometimes from the bottle, sometimes from the breast, so that he doesn't lose too much weight.
Right.
But what I will say is encouraging is if your child, if you're blessed to have just your child come full term, babies will set how much milk they need.
Right.
So you don't need to try to make more for them.
Right.
They
get a freezer full.
No.
Right.
Do you know how much milk I threw away and how engorged I was, because my baby didn't get the chance to set the amount. It was the pump. And so I ended up with an oversupply of milk when if, later on it balanced itself out, and when we got exclusively to the breast, everything worked itself out. But I mean, I was huge, just in leaking everywhere, and I feel like you can avoid that learning curve if your baby is able to latch on, if you just allow them to set the milk flow, so to speak.
Right. So how long have you guys been, so now he's breastfed, right?
Yes.
Yes. He's exclusively breastfed on the breast. Okay.
Well, now he eats solids as well, but
Right.
he still takes breast milk from the breast.
Right. How old is he now?
He will be 2 in October.
Okay.
When I want to talk about this too, I feel like I don't breastfeed in public, and I have a challenge even with around family members, because I feel like I'm kind of shunned because he's a toddler, and people feel like, oh, he has teeth, when are you going to get him off the breast?
Especially with brown boys.
Yes, and I'm nourishing my son, and we're going to wean him right around 2 if we're able.
Yeah.
But I wanted him to get the full benefits, and I read that the World Health Organization
Right.
recommends breastfeeding for 2 years or even more.
Yeah.
So to be in a society where people look at you like you're doing something strange when your body was literally designed to nourish your child,
Yeah.
I think it's important to shift our thinking.
Yeah. Especially now, like during COVID, it's always a good idea, if you can, to breastfeed, because what's amazing about breastfeeding is that your child sends the chemical to you to release antibodies to basically help build their immune system for the environment around them. So, at the same time, it's like, just that a little bit of stress, just feeling like that little bit of stress from either family members or friends who don't understand, that can affect your supply. That can affect just how successful you are with breastfeeding. So, do you have any tips for anyone who may be feeling discouraged in breastfeeding? Like, how do you deal with those comments or thoughts? Like, is there a way that you?
I just don't receive it. I send it back. They can say what they want to say, but I am very sure that what I'm doing is for the complete health of my child. And if you're truly putting your child first, then what someone else is saying to you cannot trump that.
Right.
You just have to remember that it's not about what they think, or maybe even what you're going through or how you feel. You almost have to put your selfishness a little bit aside.
Yep. Yeah.
For the health and well-being of your child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we can do that, I feel like that'll open a door for success.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding.
Yeah. I feel like it's like a natural thing. Like, we're mammals, our bodies were created, and and I feel like if you cannot breastfeed from the breast, exploring different options of pumping or looking into a milk bank, or if you can get that support is very much needed. There's so many amazing resources that we're surrounded by. There's something called the La Leche organization, organization that is completely dedicated to the wellness of, the child and the mom and their breastfeeding experience. And they have representatives literally around the world. So we encourage you guys to look into that. We hope to encourage you in your journey with breastfeeding. We are just so glad. Thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate your presence. Thank you for encouraging our mothers. And we hope that you guys are encouraged. So please tune in to our next episode. And once again, thank you for watching. Bye.